In this lesson, I am going to take you through the steps of creating the windmill wool ornament. The first thing that you will do is take your pattern and get the templates. You will trace these templates onto the paper side of the fusible. My favorite fusible when working with wool is FlexiFuse. I like using FlexiFuse because it does not create any sort of sticky barrier when doing hand applique, and it is really good at adhering to wool. When I trace my shapes on the fusible, I make sure that I am tracing on the paper side, not the side that is bumpy or kind of sticky feeling, because this is the piece that will peel away eventually. I trace my shapes and I place those that are going to be in the same colorway a lot closer together than the ones that are going to be a different colorway. So this one's going to be on the white wool. These are going to be on the blue wool. And when I go to cut them out, because once the fusible is on your wool, it becomes permanent. So I try to waste as little wool as possible, but I do not want to cut out on the lines. I cut out the shape about a 1/4 inch away from the line. You can cut it a little bit closer if you like, if you want to make sure you're wasting as little wool as possible, but you want to make sure you are not cutting the fusible shapes out on the line. You want to leave a little bit of space from the line. So I've cut out the windmill, and then I'm going to cut out the blades. I'm just loosely cutting around the shape. And because these are both going to be on the blue wool, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of keep them together. I don't have to cut out every shape. I can cut them out into a big chunk like this. That's why I try to draw them pretty close together so I don't really waste any of my wool. But I have my shapes ready for my blue wool and my shape ready for my white wool. And now I'm going to go and fuse these to the wool. When you are deciding to fuse your shapes to the wool, you do want to make sure you are fusing the shape to the wrong side of the wool. Now, the good news is there really isn't a wrong or right side to wool. But wool does have two different sides. You have one side that you can see the weave a little bit better. So you can kind of see the lines of the weave and the knitting. And then you have the other side, which tends to look a little more fuzzy. So the wrong side and the right side are what you determine are wrong or right. And you want to always remember that the fusible is going to go on the wrong side. I usually like this fuzzy part to be my right side. So I'm going to make sure that I fuse my windmill to the wrong side, to the side that has the woven looking part. Some wools, you really can't even tell a difference between the two. It honestly is 100% your preference. Don't really stress if you can't tell which side is wrong and which side is right. Again, it is your preference. Sometimes it is not easy to tell. Like with this blue, this is what one side looks like. This is what the other side looks like. You can see that it's not as easy to see which side has more of the weave and which side is fuzzier. So again, don't stress. Pick whatever side you feel like is the wrong side. Place your fusible on the wrong side, and then you will be ready to go. Now that I have fused my fusible to my wool, it is time to cut out my pieces. Now I am going to cut on the drawn line. And the reason for creating our fusible pieces just a little bit larger and not cutting on the line to begin with is because it's a lot easier to cut out nice, pretty shapes when you are cutting through the paper and not trying to cut along the edge of a paper like you would with a regular template. So you can see how easy and quick that was. I use these Karen K. Buckley scissors. They have a serrated blade, and I love using them with wool because they cut easily. With the serrated edges, they actually grip the wool instead of pushing the wool away and making it hard to cut through the layers of the wool. All right, all of my pieces are cut out. So I have 2 of my background squares. This one is going to be the backing of my ornament, and I'm going to place that aside. I don't need it. And this is the background for my ornament. So I am going to peel the paper off and making sure that the fusible side is going down onto the background. I don't want to accidentally have the fusible up because then it'll get all over my iron. One thing that I do want to make sure of is that there is at least a 1/4 inch edge all the way around because I'm going to be cutting around the windmill. Now, in this case, because I have all of these little bits kind of hanging out, what I'm going to do is I am actually going to just fuse this down and stitch this first. Then I will fuse this and stitch them second. Normally, I will just put all of my pieces on there and stitch them and just go around. But in this case, I think I want to stitch this white down just so I don't have to try to jump and skip around here. I have used my iron to fuse my wool to my background. It can be hard to get wool to stick to wool because of the porous nature of the fabric. I often will spritz a little bit of water and press and just hold, and then I will turn it over and press and hold from the other side to get the wool to stick. For the next step, I am going to do a whip stitch all the way around the windmill to stitch the windmill to the background. I have stitched down my windmill. The stitches kind of just blend in because I used a wool thread for this, and wool is really good at blending in to wool. You can also use a single strand of embroidery floss to blend and hide your stitches. If you want, you could do a blanket stitch to make your stitches more visible, or a contrasting thread. I, however, just want my windmill to just be the object of attention and not the stitching, so I just did a simple whip stitch with a coordinating thread, and I did a wool thread to help it blend. If you're a beginner at stitching, I highly recommend you doing it this way until you become more comfortable with your stitches. Now that that is done, I will be putting my little windmill in place, the little blades, and the door, and I will steam these, and then I will stitch these down. I have finished stitching down my windmill to the background. You can see my stitches there and there. I will show you on the back. You can see how the whip stitch looks on the back. When you are stitching through multiple layers, like you can tell the blades, you can't really see the stitches here, because when there are multiple layers, it's okay to just stitch through the first layer and not go all the way through both layers. So that's why you don't really see the stitches for the blades on the back. Now my next step, I'm going to take some fusible. I have cut a piece of heat and bond. I like to use heat and bond because it's just a little bit thicker and heavier to make my ornament just a little bit more sturdy. And I will place this here, and I will press this, and then I will add my background piece. I have attached my fusible to the back of my ornament. I'm going to peel the paper off, and I'm going to place my second square of background on the back and iron this to fuse these pieces together. Okay, now that these pieces are fused together, I have my front with my windmill on it. I have my back that is hiding all of my stitches. You can see it's two separate pieces here. Now I'm going to cut 1/4 of an inch around the shape of my windmill. For this part, you can trace lines if you don't trust yourself. You can just use a simple chalk pencil. So now the next step, I am going to do a blanket stitch to stitch the front and the back together and to close up those two sides. The ornament has been stitched. The backing has been stitched to the front of the ornament, so you can see my little blanket stitches here, and you can see them on the back. And now I'm going to add the ribbon so that it can hang. So I just have a length of ribbon here. I cut it about 10 inches long, and I'm just going to thread it into my needle. Now this is a really thin ribbon, and my needle is a Chanel 22 needle, so it has a really big eye, so I'm able to get that ribbon in there. And I'm going to turn my ornament to the back, and I'm just going to do one little running stitch, making sure I don't go all the way through. One little running stitch across the back to pull that ribbon through. All right, so I'm pulling it through, taking the needle off, and then I'm going to loop the ribbon so that the cut ends line up at the top. So there my cut ends line up. And then I'm just going to tie a knot and pull that knot. And then I have my little hanger. I can use like some sort of fray check or trim these ribbons so that they aren't, trim them like at a diagonal so that they don't fray. And it's up to you. You can turn this so that the knot is at the bottom so it's not visible as you are hanging your ornament, or you can turn it the other way and make the knot show. But that is your ornament done.